Tonight on our front, national security has been deployed to commence investigations into perhaps one of the biggest scandals to have rocked the state. The role of power distribution services, which until 5 months ago were supposed to be in charge of the power works of the state, making sure they take over from the ECG. That letter, the insurer in Qatar, and what government did about this is what we're actually going to discuss here. That exclusive interview with the energy minister detailing what really happened on the ground and what Ghana has been doing so far to make sure that what is duly the state will actually get back to the state, and who ought to be held responsible will be held responsible for this. But with me in studio is also a man who's run that particular power sector in this country before. We'll be coming back to this point after this break. You welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Alkwa. With me in studio is Dr. Kwabena Donkor. He's a member of parliament. He's a former power minister, and I'm sure you know him very much for his very astute nature in that particular committee when he was, in times past, chairman of the Energy Committee before transitioning to becoming minister along the line during the John Dramani Mahama government. Now, today, the energy minister has been telling us that already security of the highest level, national security, has been deployed to conduct perhaps the biggest investigation required that extends beyond the borders of this country to a country like Qatar, where we're supposed to get the guarantees for PDS to be officially named the people who have taken over the section of ECG in the private sector participation program that was approved by MIDA through the Millennium Challenge Compact. That particular deal and the many problematic things why it got suspended yesterday is why we're giving you some more details here. If you've not been kept up to date to what's been happening, I sat down with the energy minister, asked the questions I hope will be on your mind. First, seeking to find out from him, on 2 different occasions, he's actually warned them about underperformance. Was that the main reason why they were suspended? If that's not why, what are the main reasons why we no longer have PDS, at least in the interim, being the ones in charge of our power distribution service in the country? The energy minister in this interview bailed it all out, gave details of what really happened, mentioned the name of the individual who said to have actually misrepresented the grouping Al-Quds, which are the insurers, where we were supposed to get the money or guarantee in forms of letters. In this interview, you can listen to him.
For my earlier comments, where just as a result of sounding some warning, for any entity of that size that may want to take over the asset of Ghanaians, it's proper that you put certain things in perspective and let them aware of the consequences. And maybe that was why those comments were actually made. But it is for me and others, it's shocking to have established that the evidence is coming out now gradually, pointing to an element of fraud. It's quite surprising and again very serious to us as government.
But isn't it also a question about due diligence?
Precisely, because I agree with you. You're perfectly right. And it is the due diligence processes that have established this. The process of execution due diligence is an ongoing process. The trigger for the commencement of the concession itself, as you are aware, has both condition subsequent and condition precedent. And so that puts in some element of due diligence processes, even during the execution phase. So it is the execution phases that has brought out this particular findings by the agency.
So if I heard you right, we couldn't have actually done this prior to this starting work on March 1, 2019. We couldn't have done that.
Well, because of the timing, you should know that it's not quite easy to have come out with such a major findings. Findings always take time. Due diligence is a process. You might have a signal, but you want to go beyond all reasonable doubt to establish the validity of the signals you have picked. That cannot be an event. That can only be a process. And so it is this process that has brought out this
Dr. Akubo believes that government, probably because of the race against time, that is why we are where we are today. That if government had fast pace right from the beginning, kept to timelines, we wouldn't be where we are today. Is it true?
I don't quite seem to understand that. Government's efforts in making sure that this agreement is executed is to make sure that things are done properly. And that is why, to a large extent, through the advisors of MIDA, the IFC, some conditions precedent were, converted to conditions subsequent. And so government was just acting based on those understanding between the advisors to MIDA, ECG, and then the shareholder itself, which is the Ministry of Finance.
Throughout this process, the suspension that we currently have, do we know how long it's going to last?
I would not be in a position to tell you today, tomorrow, or next 1 week. Don't forget, when issues of fraud are detected, it goes a bit beyond the ordinary people like ourselves. I'll be presuming that definitely, which of course I know the security agencies will be top, undertaking further details, examinations, and then to conclude really and establish conclusively that what we are saying, it's really valid.
Is it true that the Ghanaian delegation is on its way to Qatar to do this further interrogation?
Yeah, a high-powered Ghanaian delegation was put together at the ministry in the last meeting that we had about 24 hours, but they haven't set off because there have been some new developments, and so maybe within the few weeks, a few days, they may go. So definitely Ghanaian delegations will be going.
So specifically, what will be their duty out there in Qatar? Who are they meeting, and what are they seeking to verify?
I think the initial intention of that visit was to have some high-level meeting with ACUT. ACUT as the executing body that was supposed to deliver the payment security. The intention was to meet them at that higher level. Don't forget, we have done some checks, and though we were not there present, through the Ghana embassy, some exercises were conducted, and that is why this finding is coming out. Because when we got hold of this letter, since the document is fraud, the letter could also be fraud.
Okay,
and so that is why government didn't run into any actions, because we also want to go beyond. Anybody could see somewhere and write this letter and throw it out.
Because there's a question as to when you unveiled this.
Precisely. So we decided to subject the letter to further due diligence process to establish the author of that letter, whether it is the right person then supposed to sign the letter. And this was done through the embassy, and they have come out clearly and written to us that yes, of course, we met a gentleman, Musa Hag, if I can quite remember the name, and he confirmed that yes, of course, I wrote this letter and I stood by the terms of the letter. Going forward, he did even state that the officer that executed the payment security has already been suspended. So that tells you how serious the issues currently are.
In this case, was there any Ghanaian official, be it minister, deputy, or any official of this state, who failed to do what they were supposed to do, or actually is complicit in this fraud that's been mentioned?
It will be too early for me to come out with that conclusion.
There are people who are currently on the board of PDS. Are they likely to be held responsible for this?
Well, if what we are saying, the fraud has been finally established, as you are aware, you may know better than I do, fraud will vitiate contract. Yes. And if that's okay, then of course those people will have to answer questions.
Do we so far know whether the change from PDS to ECG will cost us a peso, and how much are we looking at?
The current suspension and therefore the transfer you're talking about? I don't know, not at all. I don't think there will be any monetary implication in terms of cost on part of government. No, not at all.
There is the reference, and Adam Mutawakilu speaks for the minority in Parliament on energy matters. He's insisting that there are government officials who are complicit in this particular engagement. He's demanding that you come out as government to put them out there, or else they'll be compelled to be the ones naming the people.
Well, they should come out and name the people, because we are all working in the interest of Ghanaians. And so if they have some evidence It's too late for them to be hiding it out. They should bring it out. I will see this as one of the serious jokes I've ever heard, some 30, 35 years ago. No, the NDC as usual, they are all jokers. So what I think the NDC should rather be doing at this time is to rather compliment the efforts of government and even congratulate the agency, ECG, and government efforts. That government do not sleep even during the execution process. Because as I stated on the due diligence process, it's a continuous process. And so if government continue to do that due diligence and have come out with these findings, then of course it means this is a responsible government. I think if we're there, maybe they will be sleeping and think that the project has been executed, contract has been signed, so let's watch the execution. We didn't do that. We tried to continue to subject further documents, further undertakings to some due diligence consideration.
Now, the PDS has issued a statement. They have said, and it's categorical, that they are convinced they've done nothing wrong. All the same, they will go through the process established by government.
Would you expect otherwise from them? I think that's their view.
The government doesn't share this particular view.
No, I mean, that's the view of PDS.
But in fairness to them on the other side in this particular case, in fairness to them, could we have actually decided to hold on to the suspension until we finally have evidence in the fullest form to suggest that incontrovertibly these people set out to do this and they ended up doing it?
No, we couldn't have done that because don't forget, ECG, it's a $1 billion a company. It has a number of assets, and there's a continuous cash flow that goes through the daily operation of ECG. If we had just decided to wait, nobody knows what will happen during that short period. If it is true, and that this fraud that we're talking about, it's established, and then the agency, which is PDS, knew very well that, yes, of course, we have done that. They can decide to do anything before the suspension. And so government was that fast going in to forestall or to curtail any occurrence of any malfeasance that will occur during these processes. And that is why the suspension is being placed on them.
I know that PDS is a consortium, and prior to they coming together, there were several groupings that actually came together. Are we saying that there are elements within that particular PDS with a section or one way or the other, or collectively, there's a problem with them as an institution?
I think what we're talking about is PDS. The word is PDS as an entity. An entity is an ongoing, organization. So it is the PDS. I'm not talking about individuals, but I'm talking about PDS as a corporate entity.
Okay. Now, there's also the question about how they as PDS should be perceived by people now. Can they ever take back ECG and continue with the concession that they were given? Ever? Assuming they end up being exonerated at the end of the day.
Well, of course, if it is established that the guarantee is valid, the authority that authored the guarantee has the capacity to do it, and the guarantee is coming from the authority that is supposed to do it, and that there have been a consideration. Consideration in the sense that PDS has managed to transfer money or make payment in lieu of the guarantee that was executed. If all these things has been established, then maybe we may be acting on the wrong information. Then maybe the situations, as we are rightly saying, may occur. That's one. The second one I see is that if through these due diligence processes, it's gone beyond every reasonable doubt to establish that, yes, of course, as I told you, on the gentleman who authored the letter said, yes, of course, I did it on authority and I stood by it, and the person who signed the guarantee has already been suspended, and it's to be established by the necessary agencies that there is a fraud and that the guarantee is considered null and void, then of course there is a fraudulent activity that can call for termination. Why government didn't run in to terminate? It's as a result of the fact that, because that could be a third option also open to government, we can decide that having gotten this information, we terminate it because there's fraud. The government is extremely careful that we need to establish beyond all reasonable doubt and come to a conclusive evidence that what we are saying is fraud really exists. And that is why the termination was not, approved by government. government decides to choose the options of suspension.
Have we given ourselves a time frame as to when we can establish beyond reasonable doubt this particular hunch that we have in this case?
Again, as I stated earlier, where elements of fraud are detected, it goes beyond the ordinary people like you and myself. I suppose the security agencies are on top of the issue, and maybe we'll try to find out from them how
that might take a very long while.
Not at all. Don't forget, we have capable people in this country that can act quickly on issues of this nature. So I don't think it will take a long while. The MCC is concerned, the Americans are concerned, and the Tranche 2, which is due, of course, we are also concerned about that. Don't forget, we have also signed onto the Regional Compact. The Regional Compact coming into existence is a partial index of fulfillment of this compact that we're talking about. So with all this, we all need to be careful so that we do the right thing.
That was my next question. Implications for this, of course, we've been chasing this money, the second compact, for a very long time. This decision, what are its implications for that particular MCA money?
If there is a complete termination, I see two things happening. I may be right, I may not be correct. The MCC may decide that all that they want is PSP.
Yeah,
if the decision,
sector participation.
Precisely. If the decision is that all that I want is PSP and we insist on PSP, then there will be an options for an alternative. Okay? Now, if MCC comes out and says, well, fraud has been detected, we are no longer interested in the PSP, then of course everything would have come to an existence. Then we may be losing the continuations of the Tranche 2, and also because it has implication for the Regional Compact, we may be falling a part of the Regional Compact.
Which of the scenarios are we as a country working towards? Which ones are we thinking is a more feasible one? Which one do we really want to happen under the circumstances that we find ourselves? Because already I've been hearing the likes of Theo Echampong and Rekubebe saying that we should just take back our system, fix it on our own, and as part of our general cleanup in the energy sector, make sure that we get our books clean by ourselves.
Well, I don't know. Don't forget, I've been one of the guys that I want to accuse, and you know, seriously, even on the media front, that I seem not to agree with PDS or to like the inclusion of PSP.
Openly and
no, my view is that don't forget, Ghanaians are competent. We are competent in doing things on our own. You don't have to run that. If you take PDS today, of course, it's the same Ghanaians that are running the show. Let me say that. I think that the option Ghana may want, basically, it's also not to do anything that seems to bring any sort of misunderstanding between the government of Ghana and that of the United States of America. The U.S. have been a very good ally of Ghana. Both of us played very significant development role over a number of years. So we are also cautious of the international relations, and so we would can assure you that the best decision will be taken by government. Don't forget, a Ministry of Finance is the shareholder, so of course they are in charge of this whole thing, and they will be taking the final decision.
I'll ask about the implications for our current energy sector. Are we going to have...
Not at all. The lights are on, and that is the reason why government moves in quickly to make sure that we have the lights on. Stability of power, it's guaranteed, and I can tell consumers that nothing is going to affect
in the foreseeable future. Should we see a change? Are we going to see an impact on the sector?
No, we as a country have been working seriously to make sure that we have very stable power supply. The people of this country also to drive the agenda of industrialization. If you listen carefully to the the finance minister in the just ended midterm review of the budget, he came out with some drastic measures. All these measures are to make sure that we have a stable power supply in terms of the take-or-pay provisions that were made in the contracts and the exorbitant amount of money that we pay for power not being consumed.
Yes,
so this will guarantee us a very stable...
That point I will end with, but there's this question about the ECG that needed help. The ECG that required private sector participation, obviously because there was a problem somewhere. It's the same ECG that's supposed to be running affairs down. Now, many know that essentially cars were rebranded and all of the things were changed. In fact, there are still some stuff of the ECG in the old ECG today. Some have moved into the new PDS. By this suspension, what has really changed? Is it just the top brass that's going to be changed, or there are going to be specific changes across the ECG and current PDS structures?
First of all, let me correct the impression that the coming into existence of this concession and a compact is not just because ECG, in quotes, has been claimed its incompetent or inefficiency have led to some of the costs that consumers are paying. The level of inefficiency that we think occur in ECG, that is not the final reason why the PDS is coming, the compact is coming to address.
Not because they couldn't collect enough?
Not at all. The compact is also, it's part, but I want to say that we've gone beyond that. The compact has gone beyond that to look at a bigger picture. You know, most of our infrastructure, as you are aware, there are still several conventional infrastructures that exist, old infrastructures that need to be changed. Transmission lines have been very weak. The bulk supply points, you know, are not very stable. Our metering processes have not been well regulated. So this involves some element of capital injection. So it is just not because of the inefficiency. So for somebody to think that, oh, you are bringing the same ECG back and therefore the inefficiency is going to continue, I may not be in a position to validate that assertion.
Okay. Yeah. Now, so the question also asked was whether or not there are going to be massive changes within the current structure of ECG, taking back the PDS used to be part of its unit into a different one.
No, not at all. Don't forget the when this new government took over the contracts from the previous regime. One of the instruction clause was the fact that there's going to be a layout of some of the workers. This government insists that no, the workers will not be laid off. So PDS, as you see, largely is the same ECG workers. And so I will agree with you, this suspension that we are executing now through these processes, it is the management that we're looking at. And that is why ECG is now coming in. So the workers will remain, collection of bills will continue, maintenance processes will continue, operational activities will be conducted by the same people. But we are looking now at the peak, you know, of the organizational structure to do some changes there by bringing in the management of ECG.
Now, you actually mentioned what is being done. So even though we don't know whether this is permanent or is an interim process that we are actually going through now, what is the mandate given ECG? Continue transformation and reformation of that particular sector, or they have to set out their own vision and work differently from what PDS was doing?
No, during this suspension period, ECG, it's just to come in and stabilize the situation to make sure, as I stated earlier, we have constant supply of power. Of course, ECG on its own has its own agenda of improving on their management, even before they exit. So coming in now, of course, it will give them that room to begin to improve on their own services. Why
are we going to get the money to continue with the required capital injection that was actually supposed to be brought in from all of the other sectors involved in this one? Why are we going to get the money?
No, the money will only stop coming when there's a termination. We have not terminated the contract.
So as of now, there's no cause to worry about whether or not the money will flow or not?
Not at all.
Does the government of the Republic of Ghana owe PDS any amount of money at all?
Not at all.
PDS, do they owe the government any amount of money at all?
Well, PDS, under their obligation, as supposed to, you know, execute the payment security and hand it over to ECG.
Please continue.
Well, Ghanaians I want to assure them that there's going to be stable supply of power. Operational activities of ECG will continue, and they will not be affected in any way as a result of this suspension. This suspension is just an action by government to protect your assets. So I don't think there's anything to worry about at all.
This suspension is just an action to protect your assets. That is the Energy Minister of the Republic of Ghana laying the facts bare, or trying to explain to us why government had to move in right from Sunday, where all the important meetings were being held after they were informed somewhere around June 5th, 16, that is some 15 days ago, for them to move ahead and actually do the things that's required of them. Let's not forget, this PDS takeover happened on March 1, 2019 this year. It's been more than 5 months if you want to actually calculate it. It was on July 16th that we got a letter hinting us that the specific guarantees we demanded, and again, if you have heard the minority in Ghana's parliament, they've raised questions. The minister responded to some of those questions, even the majority. And it's one of the issues that I'm seeing both minority and majority in parliament seeking to agree on this matter. In fact, they are both demanding some form of a probe. Is this now a settled matter? The Honorable Kwabena Donkor is with us here. Doc, you're welcome once again.
Thank you.
I asked you to listen thoroughly to this because I'm sure you've heard snippets of what he's been saying and what the real situation is supposed to be. Now, you've been in the power ministry. You also have some experience and competence in this particular field. First, the move to make sure that national security moves in and security agencies quickly because of the suspicion of fraud and the fear that it might be more problematic than that. Is it a step in the right direction?
For internal purposes of government, yes. But that is only for internal purposes of government. For the Ghanaian public, no. That will not be enough.
Okay.
National security has a responsibility to be a watchdog of government. And therefore, the executive arm will want to know what exactly happened. That is internal to the executive arm. But for us as a people, we need a public inquiry.
To determine what specifically?
To find out what went wrong, why it went wrong, and who were culpable, who slept on the job.
But you listened to the minister in charge of that particular ministry.
Yeah.
Exactly what is the loophole? What is unclear in your mind about what happened? We were sitting down, we heard July 16th, they wrote to us, the reinsurer and an individual who works with that particular institution, our coach, wrote to us and told us that the gentleman who had actually appended the signature to the guarantees we got from PDS, that gentleman committed fraud. How else do you want this explained?
I see this as, first of all, ineptitude on the part of the people who have put in charge of the sector. I see that as irresponsibility.
Are these not tough words?
No, we are talking of a multi-billion CD asset.
That's ECG.
That's ECG. This was a condition precedent. It was not a condition subsequent.
I've heard your colleague in Parliament say, Katie Hammond, he's on the Energy Committee still. He says that it was varied from being precedent to subsequent when they needed to race against time.
No finance institution in its right mind will hand over an asset worth $1 billion without securing. There were parts of the agreement which were moved from conditions precedent to conditions subsequent. But this is so critical.
The guarantees.
The guarantees is so critical that no institution, no financier will shift that.
No.
If we allowed a shifting, then it's even more serious. Then it is even more serious. Because, look, you are handing over an asset to a private entity, to a Ghanaian company. PDS is a Ghanaian company.
I mean, basically because it's 51% Ghanaian owned.
Yes.
But we know that the Miracles and the other institutions, they are not Ghanaian.
Listen.
So 49%
by
is...
our own company code, by our corporate regulations, any entity that has 51% indigenous local participation or local ownership is a local company. In fact, it's even defined in one of our airlines, the local content for petroleum.
Yeah.
The petroleum upstream airline. It defines what an indigenous company is. It's minimum 51% Ghanaian interest. So PDS is a Ghanaian company with some minority shareholders. So first of all, who are the Ghanaians and how did they come ahead of the queue? Remember.
What do you mean by that?
Remember, when the compact started, before the former government left office.
And so we are clear, this conversation we are currently having started way back in 2014. Yes. Indeed, the search for the lives of PDS started way back then.
Yes.
You were in government at the time.
No, I wasn't in government when it started. In fact, when
I mean, the NDC was in government, that's what I meant,
yes. When I was appointed a minister, this agreement had already been signed.
MCC, generally?
Yes, the compact had been signed.
Okay, yeah.
And one of the conditions was that we were looking for an experienced foreign entity that has the expertise, that has the financial muscle, that the Millennium Challenge Corporation was comfortable with to take over the concession. We had the two options, private sector participation and private sector ownership. Mm-hmm. We had the two options. Whether we should even sell ECG, the assets, or whether we should lease the assets. I went to cabinet, I wrote to cabinet and suggested that the concession approach was better than private sector, outright privatization, as we know it.
Okay.
And for
so the concession is still the private sector participation?
Yes, it is participation, not privatization, not ownership. Mm-hmm. And the condition was that at least, because we're also interested in promoting local content, 20% of the shareholding in whichever entity won this tender must be Ghanaian.
20%?
20%.
Not the majority, 51%?
No. The majority...
You wanted to virtually sell it off?
We're not selling.
But if Ghana is having a very small percentage of it,
listen,
compared to the people who are coming from outside, you basically have sold our birthright.
No. Listen. ECG is still the asset owner. The people of Ghana still own the asset. This is an operations concession.
Okay.
Come and operate it. I bought my vehicle. Operate the vehicle for me. I'm still the owner of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. But even in your operation, in order to be sure that my interest is protected, I still need 20% in it to see the books.
That's what we agreed to.
That was what we agreed to.
But when did we change?
We changed when the Nanado government came to power.
And you think this is not because the MCC insisted or the Millennium Challenge Authority demanded that that should be done?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that led to the pulling out of a number of at least 5 international companies that had tendered.
So because we said we wanted it to be 51% Ghanaian, that's why some international companies, perhaps of some reputation, pulled out.
Absolutely. They pulled out because, look, there was a possibility of a reputational damage.
Okay.
I'm coming to manage the concession, and I'm going to be paid for managing the concession. Mm. And yet you want to control even the entity, the vehicle we are going to use, you want to control. But if there's a reputational damage, it affects me. Of course, and serious international companies will not accept that situation. So they pulled out. Mm-hmm. And that was how PDS came into being. There were only 2 companies left, the Filipino company and BMX.
As in the one that was disqualified?
And yes, and BMX was also disqualified.
Yes.
So we had a situation where, let me be careful with my choice of words, we just handed over our national assets to an entity that we had created without the benefit of international competitive tendering, which was what we were supposed to do.
How do you see that we didn't go through international competitive tendering? Government insisted that's what happened.
If you break the process midway and everybody pulls out but 2, and the 2 left, you disqualify 1. You might have just gone through the motions, but did you get the real benefit of competitive international tendering?
You're saying that right from the beginning, PDS was set up, was groomed, was actually prepared to be the ones who should automatically be the ones being the participating partner in this case?
Absolutely. And remember that PDS is majority Ghanaian owned.
Yeah.
So who were the entities behind PDS? Assuming that the fraud that is being alleged today is proven, who have been fraudulent? It's Ghanaians. Because the majority group controls the boardroom.
But the money is supposed to be coming from somewhere, Qatar. The
No.
guarantee, sorry, the guarantees.
The guarantee, absolutely.
Yeah, yes, they're coming from Qatar.
Yes, absolutely. No Ghanaian bank on its own can guarantee $200 million on its own. No Ghanaian bank can do that. And my biggest worry is that the minister seems not to see the seriousness of the situation we are in.
Why do you say so?
I say so because it's taking us how many days upon the receipt of a tip. Let's assume for these purposes, let's see it as a tip.
July 16th.
16.
It's 15 days.
15 days to confirm whether the document was legitimate or illegitimate. The 15 days, we are talking of a multi-billion CD enterprise. ECG sales in a week is huge. So even taking a decision is taking us 2 weeks. Taking a decision to even investigate and therefore suspend during the period of investigation is taking us 2 weeks.
But you heard the minister, right? He said due diligence ought to be done because we are dealing with a Millennium Challenge Corporation that could actually trigger processes that will go against us.
Gentlemen, the minister should have done due diligence before handing the entity over. 5 months after handing over, you are now doing due diligence? And let me state categorically that this discovery did not arise out of our due diligence.
Why do you say so?
Yes, because somebody wrote to us, gave us a tip-off.
Of course, yes. I mean, the gentleman, Musa.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So it is not even as a result of our own due diligence, as the minister wants to posit. We got a tip. It means we were sleeping on the job. And this is, for me...
Is it strange? Is it the first time this is happening?
It is just too strange.
Really?
Look,
that we decide to defer some process
yes,
in the throes of that particular... Of course, it's been implemented today.
precisely.
And when we realize there's a problem, we cancel it. Is it not better than realizing there's a problem?
Did we realize there was a problem or
our
a
attention
problem
was drawn
to it? Did we realize?
Okay, of course. I mean, whichever way, our attention was drawn to the
Precisely.
problem.
So, for 5 months, assuming without admitting that it even moved from condition precedent to condition subsequent.
Okay.
For the 5 months, what were we doing? This is the financial instrument you hold that should they be unable to perform, should they elope with our money.
This is your security, actually.
This is our security. There are two securities. This is what we hold as guarantee that should they run away with our money, we can recover from this. And that very security, you will not even confirm its authenticity. It takes somebody 5 months after you've handed the entity over for somebody to come and say, oh, look, either as a result of internal checks or something that this document we are holding is not legitimate.
Government is doing everything it can, including sending a delegation to verify even the claims of the person. Is that not a step in the right direction?
After the horse has bolted?
Of course, but this can be verified. The PDS is represented by human beings, directors, we know them. The PDS also are people who actually, and of course, the minister says if they are found to be culpable, they'll be held responsible.
Look, ask a level 1 banker. A level 1 banker, how many working days it takes to authenticate a guarantee or a standby letter of credit or a letter of credit. It should not take more than 3 working days. It should not take more than 3 working days.
You suggested that in our case, it took us like 5 months.
5 months. Meanwhile, we're even supposed to have authenticated this before handing over. How do you hand over your vehicle to a driver whose driving license you have not even authenticated?
Could we have actually established on the belief that automatically a driver of their pedigree will necessarily have a driving license that's operational not one that's defective?
What is the pedigree of PDS? The majority shareholders. What is their pedigree in the power sector?
Sorry, who in that particular list are you questioning?
The whole 51%. What is their pedigree in distribution? Tell us which of the local entities had been involved in distribution. So let's not talk about pedigree. They had no pedigree.
For the avoidance of doubt, and I think I would, the likes of Philip Ayesu, of course, they are also politically exposed people in there. So Philip Ayesu, the likes of the gentleman by the name Edu Chum, Kwabena Edu, and these groups belong to different ones, and I'm not lumping them together as all directors of PDS, but there are the various groups that came together to form the PDS institution as we find it today. There's also reference to some Theodore Fred Asamani, for example. Are there not people who have lived very competent lives in this country?
Did they, when they tender in their individual names or in their corporate names?
No, in a corporate PDS structure.
Precisely.
Yes, that's true.
Precisely. None of the entities that formed the Ghanaian Quad had been in the distribution sector, had experience in distribution in Ghana.
None of them?
No, none of the companies, the entities.
Not in Ghana or
yes,
elsewhere?
In Ghana, none of the entities. So,
but is experience in that particular sector a prerequisite requirement for engaging people that can?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we sent out the terms, the invitation for companies to bid, we were looking for companies with known competencies internationally, not just in one country. We were looking for with companies with a financial muscle, and we're looking for companies with the managerial know-how. These were the things we were looking for. We end up with some mashed potato that does not.
We are still at the preliminary stage of verifying these. At least that's what government is saying.
That is what government is saying.
I will add caution on your side.
Look, I am extremely cautious, but I'm extremely optimistic that we went about this the wrong way. We've ended up in the wrong alley. Conditions precedent, you guarantee the document that is your only safeguard. 5 months after handing over the entity, you have no clue that the document was a DAT document. It takes a tip from somewhere, and you want us to praise you because having received the tip, even then it takes you 2 weeks to act. Even having received the tip, it takes you 2 weeks. And you expect Ghana to praise you. In our local parlance here, you say you've gone to play Chaskele with our national asset, and you want us to praise you. No. Let's get serious as a nation. We may not agree with the whole private sector participation, but the minimum we can do is to ensure that it's done properly, so that whatever benefits that are inherent in the arrangement will inure to the good people of Ghana. Right now, our credibility as a nation, whichever way it goes, our credibility is taking a hit.
Really?
That we can't
we're
even do.
We're not the ones who committed the fraud.
That we can't even
We're not the ones who actually appended a signature that is not supposed to be on the thing. We're not the ones who actually... What did States Ghana do wrong? Did it engage in any form of unfairness? Did it do anything that's contrary to law in this country?
My brother, if somebody dupes you, you are a dude. If you sit down and allow somebody to dupe you, If somebody comes to tell you that, look, I have 700 kilos of gold, and then you pay before verifying whether what is being presented as gold is gold.
It's gold as in and of itself as gold, yes.
Yes. Your own integrity, your own credibility, your own reputation is damaged. Must we put ourselves in harm's way? With all the lawyers, with all the financial engineers we have, with all the finance people that we have, top bankers that we have produced. Currently, there's a Ghanaian lady heading Stanchart. There's a Ghanaian heading Stanbic, etc. Are they not all Ghanaians? Can Bank of Ghana do due diligence on a guarantee? How long must it take? There's something absolutely messy about that, and it smells of irresponsibility, incompetence, and the dereliction of duty.
So who actually decided not to do their duty in this case?
Who
was derelict?
The Ministry of Finance.
Ministry.
The Minister for Finance.
Finance Minister himself.
Finance Minister, Energy Minister, MEDA. We set up a whole development authority, put it in the office of the president. Now, that is how serious.
Now,
with all this,
to be fair,
yes,
the Energy Minister will not be the one verifying the guarantee. Will not be out of the finance end because it's purely part of financial transactions.
Excuse me, he has sector responsibility.
Yes, but so this is purely finance in this case.
So at the minimum, why is he the one speaking? Because he has sector responsibility. At the minimum, he will prompt the Attorney General, the Finance Ministry, to ensure that we'll go through all the processes. Let me tell you, you know who signed the compact? The Finance Minister.
Yes. So that's why I'm
no.
That's why I have a difficult to understand why you insist that the verification of a guarantee should be the responsibility, or an energy minister should be concerned about that.
Absolutely, you must be concerned because it comes under your sector. If we go for a loan for Ghana Water, the loan is finally signed by the Minister of Finance, not by the Minister of Works.
Yes,
but
and if there's a transaction difficulty in securing that particular loan, why should it be the responsibility of the recipient ministry?
Yeah, because you have sectoral responsibility for that sector. Everything that goes right in that sector, you take credit. If something goes wrong, and mind you, the minister sits on the board of MEDA.
Okay, I get you. Yeah. Now, the people you've mentioned, specifically the finance minister, the energy minister, who you say were derelict in this particular matter.
The Attorney General.
Attorney General too.
It's a matter of legalese.
Okay, the Attorney General they insist that the meetings included their legal advisors.
Yes, absolutely. And they sit on the MEDA board.
Okay, so what kind of accountability should we demand from these people?
In most other jurisdictions, some of them should be resigning on principle for having failed to do what Ghanaians expect of them to do. The minimum you can do is to ensure that the documentation upon which you handed over is correct. How long does it take to verify documentation? There are specialized firms in today's world that specialize in confirming and reconfirming some of this documentation. In fact, even in our Securities and Exchange Commission, if we have sought their involvement, they will at least have verified that the guarantees were questionable, or the Bank of Ghana has a session that is with economic intelligence, financial intelligence.
There's a matter that I need to bring to your attention, and you've heard the PDS response, right? They said they've taken note of the statement issued by government through the Ministry of Information on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, acting for and on behalf of Government of Ghana and the Electricity Company of Ghana. Now, it proceeds to say that PDS wishes to state, for the record, that has always acted and will continue to act in good faith at all times. PDS will go through due process by complying with the terms of the transaction agreement executed between it and ECG on one hand and the government of Ghana through the Finance Ministry on the other hand.
Yes.
Obviously, it insists is that nothing wrong.
Well, what else can they say at this time? When Ghana government itself comes out to say it is not yet proven.
Yeah, it's a preliminary investigation.
Precisely.
Yes.
So if it's preliminary, the question then is, why suspend the contract?
Yeah, they say that they needed to safeguard our assets as early as possible.
Which they ought to have done even before handing over the assets.
But it's better late than never.
So should we applaud you for sleeping on the job? As the minister said in that clip, that we should even be praising them for taking this action. Should we applaud you for suddenly waking out of slumber? No. We must be serious as a nation.
Now, let me get this straight. Even though you agree and the ministry insists that they are not done with the final determination of this matter, you still want heads to roll.
How long does it take to confirm the authenticity of a guarantee?
We are preparing a delegation. The minister heard, you heard it.
You don't need a delegation. We don't need a delegation. There are international settlement systems.
Yes.
Look, Bank of Ghana, within 3 working days, can come out with a statement, can prove whether this document that has been given to us will be honored or will not be honored.
But, Doc, you are actually belittling the fact that this is blown up to be a scandal. And we are even unsure whether the gentleman who sent us the letter alerting us is actually sending us the authentic one, even though we've gone to actually see whether or not he's the same person. Again, we need to verify that the institution Al-Quds itself is in the position to give us the kind of money that they give us or the guarantee that they give us. It's way bigger than just having to verify a paper. You agree, right?
Look, first of all, if you produce a guarantee, normally they will ask for a AA or a AAA rated bank to issue the guarantee.
Yeah.
First of all, is the Al-Quds, does it meet that standard? That is one.
Yeah.
2, assuming without admitting that they meet that standard, do they have the capacity to issue the guarantee? 3, if they have the capacity, is the document we are holding legitimate? How long does it take to prove this?
And you say 3 days.
3 working days. Ask any banker, 3 working days, this can be confirmed. And we've had it even after being tipped. It's taken us 2 weeks.
Is it not too early to ask for resignations? It's not too early.
Why should it be too early?
Because you are still doing investigations.
The whole process, it just means one, administratively, we went about the process wrongly.
Okay.
And that alone is enough for somebody to resign on principle. Yes, this happened under my watch, and therefore, I will step aside.
You are only living at the ministerial level, or you think it should go beyond the ministerial level?
It should go beyond the ministerial level. MIDA.
MIDA?
MIDA. The chief executive of MIDA, the board of MIDA must also take responsibility. Then, of course, who misled cabinet? Who misled cabinet?
Is it possible somebody misled?
Absolutely, because cabinet
on the face of the paper, we're all deceived.
The way government work is that somebody will have to go to cabinet
and present this.
And cabinet will approve based on the
what
presentation.
Has been presented.
And it is expected that you have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that what you present to cabinet on financial matters is legitimate.
Doc, I appreciate your coming in today. Thank you so much. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is actually a former power minister in Ghana, and we've been talking about this particular scandal on our hands to do with the suspension of PDS after it was found out some element of fraud was involved in the securities they presented as guarantee to to get us to give them their ECG. ECG is back to its owner, and we're exploring this issue in our subsequent days and getting to the bottom of the matter. Once again, thank you so much, Doc, for coming to our studios here today. And folks, thank you also so much for joining us at today's edition of Upfront. My name is Raymond Darkwa.